Today's daf we're going to be learning is Ketubot, daf Kuftet, reminding everybody that the Siyum on Zoom will be this Wednesday. There's also Hebrew Siyum on Zoom on Tuesday. That will also take place in Ranana in person. And anyone who wants to come, who's around, who lives even far, might be worth coming to with the Siyum Hashas of Aviva will be very exciting. Also, Aviva's going to share her Siyum Hashas on Zoom on Wednesday. So everyone's invited, and there's also Siyumim in Jerusalem, in Modi'in, and in other places around. Some of the dates haven't been finalized, but the registration for all the Siyumim in Israel is on the Hebrew site, and the registration for the English Siyum on Zoom on Wednesday is on the English site. And there are places around in America, if you're part of a few WhatsApp groups, there's also local Siyums happening in different places, Hempstead, New Haven, etc. So if you're not part of a local community group, you should join your groups. There's on our website, you can join the community, and then you can see what's going on where you are. Okay, today's daf is dedicated with love by the Hadran Daf Yomi group of Cheshmonaim, a wonderful friend and Chavruta Phyllis Hecht and her entire family on the occasion of the Bar Mitzvah of her son Caleb. This celebrated this past Shabbat Breshit. May the special simcha bring joy and light as we pray for the good health of Phyllis, Gittel, Peshabat, Masha, Rachel. Today's daf is also sponsored out of the marriage of David and Eve Farber's daughter, Ali, my niece. Mazal tov. Okay, we're going to get started with the Mishna at the bottom of daf Kuf Chet Amud Bet. We're up to case number 3 of Admon and the rabbis. Remember, Chanan disagreed with the Bnei Kohanim Gdolim on 2 issues, and Admon disagrees with the rabbis on 7. So, aposek ma'ot lechatano. A father-in-law commits money for the dowry of his daughter to their son-in-law. So they're already betrothed, which remember means if you want to get out of it, you have to get a divorce. They're already betrothed, and the father says, I will give you X amount of money. But pashat lo et harega. But he goes bankrupt, and he has no money, and he can't pay up. So again, we're going to have a bunch of strange wording in the Mishnayot in this chapter. So here goes another one. Teshev ad shtalbin rosha. So she waits until her hair turns white, meaning she's stuck. There's nothing she can do. She just sits around waiting till the father pays up the money. Otherwise, she's stuck. Basically, she has no means of. Remember, we learned in the beginning of the Masechet that after a year, the husband's supposed to marry her, and if he doesn't, he basically already has to give her mizonot. In this case, since the father committed money and is now defaulting on his promise, there's nothing she can do about it. She can't enforce him marrying her, and she has no means. Now, of course, if he wants to, he can divorce her and get out of it. But if he doesn't, she's stuck. Terrible situation. Admon Omer, she can say to him the following: I get it if I made the commitment to you. If I made the commitment to you, then you're right. I'd have to wait till my hair turned white, right, until we pay up the money. But why are you penalizing me for something my father did? Which is interesting that Admon says this, because until now we've always seen that the father can act on behalf of the daughter, and we almost found it, sometimes not always so easy that basically the father can control her. According to Admon, no. She could say, my father is my father and I'm me, and we're 2 different people, and don't penalize me for my father's inability to pay you the money. He made a commitment, but that has nothing to do with me. And therefore, oknos, optul, either marry me or let me go, divorce me. Amar Rabban Gamliel, ro'ani tivrei Admon. And Rabban Gamliel, in fact, sides with Admon and says she's right. She can claim, okay, this has nothing to do with me. This wasn't my commitment. Let me go. Or marry me, despite the fact that we haven't paid you the money. To which the Gemara points out that there's another version of this machloket. Okay, there was a different traditions about what exactly the machloket is about, and they're going to quote the Tosefta. When the Tosefta, it appears differently. Matznitin de loki hai Tana. The Mishna does not go like the following Tana, which is going to be Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. De Tanya, as it says in the braita, which is really the Tosefta. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. Lo nechleku admo v'chachamim. They don't actually disagree. Ala posek ma'ot lechatano pashat lo et harega. They don't disagree about a case where they commit, right? Where he commits money to his son-in-law and won't pay the money, Meaning, we're not going to get yet to the machloket. Right now, we're going to say they all agree on what we understood Admon saying in our Mishna. They all agree that if the father was the one who committed the money, then the daughter can say, this has nothing to do with me, and you either have to marry me or divorce me, but don't keep me stranded here. We're stuck. Al ma nechleku, what's the debate? Al shepaska hi al atzma. The debate is when she committed the money. If she committed that she would give him money when they got married, then there's a machloket. Chachamim omrim tishev ad shetabin rosha. She has to wait until she turns gray or white, right? Basically meaning she's stuck until she pays the money, really. Admon omer, yicholai shetomal, kasvura anisha abba noten alai. She still could blame it on her father. Because she could say, right, I didn't have my own money. I was assuming my father was going to pay for me. This is the classic Talmudic woman, right? She's stuck. She doesn't have her own money, so she committed something, assuming she had the backing of her father. Turns out her father goes bankrupt, has no money left, and can't pay up. She says, well, it's not my problem. I committed for him. And in this case, Admon basically says, oh, kenoso patul, she can say to him, this really doesn't have to do with me, even though she herself made the commitment. Very interesting. So we have two versions of the machloket. And likewise, in the Tosefta, Amar Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel agrees, again, with Admon. So now, Tana, there's a braita about this. Bamed dvarim amurim bigdola, aval biktana kofi. In what way, in what case is this said? If she is of age already. But if she hasn't reached maturity, then we force. Now, it doesn't say who we force what. Kofin lama. Maybe we say we force the father to pay up, right? She made the commitment, he has to pay up. If she was a ketana, well, if a minor woman or girl made a commitment, we don't make the father pay up her commitment. Why? Because we don't take a minor seriously ever. A minor's commitment is basically equal to nothing. So it can't possibly be we force the father. Ela amarava, so Rava explained, what did this braita mean? Kofin laba liten get. Okay, so again, if she's a gdola and she made this commitment and the father can't pay up, there's a machloket Admon and Chanan. But if she made the commitment when she was a minor, then we basically treat that as nothing and we can force him either to marry her or to divorce her. So we now basically, what we showed so far in the Mishna is there's a different version, and the version has to do with the woman making a commitment and not the father making the commitment. Okay, if the father made the commitment, then for sure the woman can get out of it and say, this has nothing to do with me. It's only when she makes the commitment, assuming her father is going to back her up, and then the father doesn't, does she have a way to get out of it and say, listen, it's not my fault, don't make me suffer. Or it's a commitment's a commitment, and she has to keep to it. Obviously, though, that would only be in the case where she's a gdola, where her commitment means something. Now we get to, since we now finished the 3 cases of Admon, we're going to talk about how we hold. So we had, why do I say we finished the 3 cases? There's really 7 cases. But the first 3, Rabban Gamliel says, Ro'eh ani divrei Admon. It's just really interesting to note, since we just read Parshat Breshit, that in Parshat Breshit, I think it's Pasuk Aleph, chapter 1, verse 4, where it says, Vayar Elohim ki tov, that God saw it was good. There's a whole discussion in the Ramban about what it means to see. And he quotes, he quotes our Mishna specifically on that pasuk. So if you want to look at the Ramban commentary on the Torah and hear more about this phrase, the specific use of the phrase Admon in context with Parshat Shavua, it's very interesting because both are cases where someone says, I see something and it's good. It's very interesting. Okay, but that's an aside. I'm not going to get into that right now. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar mishmei Chizkiah. So Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar says in the name of Chizkiah, Kol makom she'amar Rabban Gamliel ro'eh ani divrei Admon halacha k'moto. Says something very simple and something that seems pretty obvious, which is when Rabban Gamliel says, I see divrei Admon, meaning I agree with divrei Admon, the halacha is it that way, which basically means we hold like Admon for the first 3, and it sounds like we don't really hold like Admon for the last 4. Amalei Rava le Rav Nachman. Afilu bebraita. Rava says to Rav Nachman, do you mean even, or did Rabbi Yitzchak mean even in the Tosefta? Because remember, we have two different versions of what the machloket Admon and the rabbis was. And in both versions, it's in our specific case, both versions, it says that Rabban Gamliel agreed with Admon. Now, obviously, we don't paskin like both because there's a machloket between the version in the braita and the version in the Mishna, or the version of Tosefta and the version in the Mishna. But the question is, if you hold by the version of the Tosefta, do you also agree that we hold like Admon there because the same phraseology appears? To which he says, Amarle, Rav Nachman says to him, Mikam Melina b'Mishna. I didn't say specifically in the Mishnah, I meant anywhere. In other words, why would you assume that I only meant in the Mishnah? I meant anywhere it says, we hold like Rabban Gamliel, which means if you hold by the version of Tosefta over the version of our Mishnah, then yes, we're going to hold like Rabban Gamliel there, like Admon there also. Now we're going to have Rabbi Zeira. Rabbi Zeira's statement is going to seem to contradict what Rabbi Yitzchak just said. And the Gemara is convinced, for whatever reason, that those two have to work together. And they're going to basically reread what Rabbi Zeira says 2 times. We're basically going to have 3 different readings of Rabbi Zeira until we get it right, until it works well with what Rabbi Yitzchak just said. Amar Rabbi Zeira, Amar Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah, Shnei Dvarim Sha'amar Chanan, Halacha Kayotze Bo. Okay, the 2 that Chanan said we hold by, and Shiv'at Dvarim Shamar Admon Ein Halacha Kayotze Bo. Now, what does it mean Halacha Kayotze Bo? Kayotze Bo means like the one who held like him. That's the way they're understanding it. So let's go back to the beginning. Chanan and the Bnei Kohanim Gdolim had a machloket, and remember that Rabbi Yosef ben Hyrcanus held like the Bnei Kohanim Gdolim, and Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai held like Chanan. So basically, the 2 things that Chanan said, the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who held like Chanan. And the 7 things that Admon said, Ein halacha kayotze bo, which sounds like we don't hold like Rabban Gamliel, which sounds like we don't hold like Admon in the first 3. We do hold like Admon, it sounds like possibly in the last 4, because the halacha is not like kayotze bo, the one who agrees with him. The one who agreed with him only agreed with him on 3. So my kamar, what exactly does this mean? If it's going to say like this, this is the first reading. Right, the halacha, it said kayotze bo. What it meant is the halacha is like Chanan and the one who agrees with him. The shiv'at dvarim shamar Admon, of the 7 that Admon said, ein halacha kamoto v'lo kayotze bo. So right now they're not saying it the way I said. They're saying maybe it means the halacha is not like Admon and not like Rabban Gamliel. So not the way I said, but maybe it means we don't hold like Admon at all, and not even like Rabban Gamliel, who held like Admon in the first 3. To which they say, that doesn't make sense though, because it contradicts, as I already told you, contradicts Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar, Mishmei Chizkiah, didn't he say, in the name of Chizkiah, Kol makom shamar Rabban Gamliel ro'eni tivrei Admon halacha kamoto. So it can't really be we're going against Chizkiah, who said, Rabbi Yitzchak, who held in the name of Chizkiah, that we hold at least by the first 3. So therefore they say halacha kama. Second explanation. Shnei dvarim shamar Chanan halacha kamoto v'chayotze bo. When it comes to Chanan, we agree that halacha is like Chanan and like Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, who held like him. But the second part we're going to change. Shiv'at dvarim shamar Admon ein halacha kayotze bo, hak moto halacha b'kulu. We don't hold like Rabban Gamliel. In what sense don't we hold like him? Rabban Gamliel wanted to distinguish between the first 3 and the second 4, right? He said, the first 3, I agree with Admon. Well, we don't hold like him in saying we only agree with Admon in the first 3. And that's why he says, Ein halacha kayotze bo. We don't hold like Rabban Gamliel, that we only hold like Admon in the first 3. Ela halacha kamoto b'kulu. We hold like Admon in all 7 cases. That's option 2. To which they say that still doesn't fit in with Rabbi Yitzchak. Why? V'ha'amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar mishmei Chizkiah, kol makom shamar Rabban Gamliel ro'eh ani tivrei Admon halacha kamoto, which sounds like amar in lo amar lo. It sounds like we hold like Rabban Gamliel every time he holds like Admon, which means we don't hold like Admon when Rabban Gamliel doesn't hold like Admon, right? It sounds very clear that we really only hold like Admon in the first 3 cases. So how do we read this line of Rabbi Zeira if it's so clear from Chizkiah that was quoted by Rabbi Yitzchak that we only hold like Admon in case number 1, 2, and 3? So to do this, they really have to change what Admon says, which is what Rabbi Zeira said, אלא הכי כמה. שני דברים שאמר חנן, הלכה כמותו וכיוצא בו. That we haven't changed at all, right? The halacha is like Hanan and like the one who holds like him, which is Rabbi Yochanan and Zakat. וכיוצא בו, and like that, שבעה דברים שאמר Admon, in other words, not really like that, but parallel to that, we have Admon who's going to be treated a little differently. And now if you look back at the original words, you'll see they just changed it entirely, which is, יש מהן שהלכה כמותו וכיוצא בו. There are some of the cases of Admon where we hold like him and like the one who held like him, meaning, right, just like Hanan had Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai who supported him, Admon had Rabban Gamliel who supported him, and in those cases we hold like both of them. V'yesh mehen she'en halacha kamoto ela kayotze bo. And then there's other cases where we don't hold like Admon, but we hold like Rabban Gamliel, who doesn't hold like Admon. Follow? So basically, we're going to end up saying exactly the way we understood Rabbi Yitzchak is what Rabbi Zeira is saying, which is when it comes to Admon, we're going to hold like him in the first three, but we're not going to hold like him in the second group, which is the last four. Okay, that was very complicated, but just to get to how we hold like, basically holding like Rabban Gamliel and not like Admon across the board. Okay, 1 second, yeah. Right, so b'kol makom shamar Rabban Gamliel ro'eh ani divrei Admon halacha kamoto and inach lo. So anytime it says Gamliel said I hold like Admon, the halacha is going to be that way, but not in all the others. New Mishna. Okay, this Mishna is a bit complicated, so follow the characters. I'm going to name them. Okay, we're going to have Ruvain, and we're going to have Rachel and Tamar. Okay, so 3 characters. In the beginning, we're actually, okay, we're going to, 3 characters. Ha'orer ala sadeh v'hu chatum aleha be'ed. Okay, I specifically made one male character because he's the one who's going to sign on a document. Generally, witnesses had to be male. So also, right, we're going to assume the one who signs on the document is male. I chose female for the other ones. So we're going to have Rachel sells a field to Tamar. And Reuven is signed as one of the witnesses on the document. Okay, so it sounds like Reuven is admitting that Rachel owned the field and is now selling it to Tamar, and Tamar is now the owner of the field. Seems pretty reasonable. He signed on a document that said that Rachel is selling the field to Tamar. If he didn't think that Rachel owned the field, he shouldn't have signed on the document, right? Well, maybe yes, maybe no. So he's now called, I'm going to read the words again. Ha'orer al hasadeh v'hu chatum alav be'ed. So far, all I explained was the second part. He's chatum alav be'ed. He's signed on a document of sale of one field to another. But then, now go back to the beginning, ha'orer al hasadeh. He now claims that the field that Rachel sold to Tamar was not Rachel's field to sell. It was stolen from him, and he's the rightful owner of that field. But yet he signed on a document that basically vouches for the fact that the field is Rachel's because he said Rachel sold the field to Tamar. So now he goes to Tamar and he says, it's very nice you bought that field from Rachel, but that field belonged to me. Admon says we believe Reuven that the field is his. Why? Right? Probably if he could provide proof that at some point the field was his, right? Let's say he has a document from a long time ago that he bought the field. And she doesn't have a document, Rachel, that she bought it from him. So he comes and says, listen, I know you're living on that field, but here's my document, right? This was mine. And you must have stolen it from me. And she comes and says, but you signed, you're signed on a deal that I sold it. You must admit that it's mine. Comes Admon and he says, well, there was a reason I signed it. I had an ulterior motive. And that's going to be the key for today. If you have an ulterior motive, Admon says, we believe you. What was his ulterior motive? He knew that it was going to be very hard. He knew that Rachel was a tough woman. He wasn't going to get the field from Rachel. So he said, I'd rather the field be in the hands of Tamar. I know how to get it out of Tamar's hands, right? Maybe she can't afford a fancy schmancy lawyer, and I know I'll have a better chance of getting it out of her. And that's why I was happy to sign on the field and get it over to Tamar's ownership so I could then demand it back. The rabbis say no way, no how. That's not a good enough ulterior motive to prove that he signed on a document that it was hers. He basically admitted it was hers, and he can't come forward now and say that field was mine. That's case number 1. Case number 2 is a little bit more complicated, but again, if you follow, it shouldn't be so complicated. Asa'a siman la'achil. Let's say Rachel sold the field to Tamar, same case. But the field that we're arguing about is not the field she sold to Tamar. What she did was this. There were two fields next to each other. She sold the one on the right to Tamar. And she said in the document she wrote, and the left border, it borders on my field to the left. Comes Reuven, he signs on that document that says that it borders on my field to the left. Remember, the field to the left is not the one they sold. They sold the field to the right, saying that in the document it said, and it borders on my field to the left, which means basically the document says that the field on the left is Rachel's. But now, right, it's marking the boundary, saying here's the boundary and it borders on my field. So now comes Reuven and says, the field on the left is mine, even though he's signed on a document that says that the field on the left is Rachel's. So in that case, ibed zchuto. Why? Because he can't have the same claim that Admon said in the first case, because this field didn't change ownership. There he claims I wanted it to change ownership so that I could claim it as my own and deal with Tamar rather than Rachel. In this case, the field in question stayed in Rachel's domain. So basically, the claim that Admon said is just not relevant here. So even Admon will agree that he's not believed to claim the field on the left. Even though we're going to see, maybe he has some sort of claim later on in the Gemara. We'll see an actual case where somebody makes a good claim and gets the land back. That will have to wait. So Amar Abai, the first thing Abai says, he points out something very interesting. Lo shanu ela ed. This is all about a witness signed on a document. Aval dayan, which is what we thought. Aval dayan lo ibed zchuto. If I were the judge, now what does the judge sign on documents? There's two things that happen. First, we have a deed of sale and witnesses sign. If somebody starts complaining, there's a problem, and they bring forward the document and say, these witnesses, it's a forgery. So the judges look into it, check the signatures. If they do what's called kiyum shtarot, they verify the document. Now, if in the case in question was that a judge who verified the document then claims later, oh, what are you talking about? That land was mine. Then even the rabbis don't disagree. Why is that? Ditani Rabbi Zeira brings a braita that says, Ein ha'idim chotmim al shtar elen ken kra'uhu. Okay, this any lawyer will tell you, right? Don't sign on a document unless you read it, right? If Reuven claims, oh, I never read the document, I didn't even know it said in there that the land was Rachel's, of course no one's going to believe him. That's your fault for not reading the document. You're signed on it. That's your job as a witness. Moving now to Amabet, Aval hadayanim chotmim afa pi shelo kra'u. When judges verify a document, they have no responsibility to read the document, because what are they doing? They're not verifying the document, they're verifying the signatures of the witnesses. So their job is just to look at the signatures of the witnesses. Their job is not to read over the document. So therefore, if a judge is signed on verifying signatures of witnesses on a document that testifies that the land belongs to somebody else, and then the judge comes forward and says, but the land is mine, that judge can claim whatever they want. We can believe the judge, if he has supporting evidence, because you can't use this against him and say, but you're signed on the document, because he's only verifying the witnesses' signatures and not the content of the document. So that's an aside. Now we're going to go back to our topic. So now we're on case 2. Okay, case 1, we got down pat, right? Someone sold the document to someone, land to someone else. Reuven is signed on the document, right? Rachel sold it to Tamar. Reuven says, Tamar, that land was mine. Admon says, Reuven's believed because even though he admitted that Rachel owned the land, he didn't really admit it. He just really wanted to get into Tamar's hands to be able to collect it more easily. And the rabbis say that is not a good claim. But in the case of Rachel, again, Rachel sold the land to Tamar and said, here's the boundary marker. This is my property on the left. And Reuven was signed on it. In that case, everybody agrees that Reuven loses his rights to claim that it was his. But comes Abai and he says, Lo shanu ela la'achel, aval la'atzmo lo ibed et zchuto. That's only when Rachel sold the neighboring field to Tamar. If Rachel sold the neighboring field to Reuven, and then Reuven and said, and the boundary marker is right on the left, that's my field. And later Reuven said, really the field on the left is mine. He could have an ulterior motive here. What was his ulterior motive? He knew that if he didn't let Rachel put that in there, right? He knew that Rachel stole his field. He was buying the second half. The second half, I don't think, was stolen. Okay, that's why he was buying it. But the first half was really, right? In other words, half, whatever you call it, the field on the right and the field on the left. The field on the right, he bought. That was Rachel. But the field on the left, she stole. Okay, now, which makes sense, right? She was the neighbor and she kind of crept into his territory, took some of his territory, and it was his. He signed, even though it said, or not, in this case, he didn't sign. He was the purchaser. He purchased the field on the right, knowing that in the document it said, but I own the field to the left, basically, right? Rachel wrote that. He was willing to do that because he really wanted the field on the right, because it was the one right next to his own field. And he said, I'll deal with getting back my stolen property later. But if I don't admit to this right now in the document, she won't sell me the field. So in order to get the sale to go through, he was willing to just go with the fact that she wrote, and it borders on my field on the left, figuring I'll at least deal with that later. Once I get this part purchased, I'll get back my stolen property after. Now, if you want to make one kind of claim against Reuven and say, but you know, you should have at least been smart about it. Now, when you sign on a document, and it's not exactly the truth, like in this case, right? Part of it's truth, but part of it is not, because he's admitting that she owns a field that she doesn't really own. Generally, what you do is you go to three people on the side and you write a moda'ah. You write a note that basically says, even though I'm signed on this document, right? We had this in a different case where people were forced to sign a document and then they went on the side and they wrote to someone, just so you know, I was forced to sign this document. I didn't really mean to, right? I didn't mean, it's not true. So we should have done that. But what's the problem? The whole problem is Reuven doesn't want Rachel not to sell him the property on the right. So therefore, he's willing to lie about the property on the left. And he doesn't want to be Mosera Moda'ah and make this announcement in front of a few people, because we all know, this is the way you say word travels very quickly. This friend has a friend, he mentions it to his friend, he mentions it to his friend, it gets back to Rachel, and then Rachel says, oh, if you're going to claim that I stole this property on the left, I'm definitely not selling you the property on the right. I'll go sell it to somebody else. So therefore, he's believed. Okay, so that's all saying that the Mishna was talking about a case where Rachel sold the property on the right to Tamar, to some other person. But if she sold it to Reuven, then he could claim, I did it I had an ulterior motive because I wanted to make sure the sale went through. And that's why I was willing to admit, even though it wasn't really true, that the field on the left was hers. Now we get to a very interesting case. The background to this case to understand, one of the things we need to understand is that when you have a case with orphans, we generally say it's called ta'aninanle, which means usually it's the judges, and some of the people ask, in this case, it's going to be the apitropos, makes all sorts of claims for the orphan. Theoretically, the judges should be doing it, and some people question, why didn't the judges do it? Some of the commentaries, there's a big debate about this case. Why didn't some of the judges make the claims, and why they let the apitropos do it? Some people say, well, if the apitropos had it, they would have. Some people say, well, claims only, the whole concept of ta'anina is basic claims. And this apitropos came up, he was a very smart guy. He came up with super creative claims that aren't within the realm of the normal claims. Okay, there's a whole debate about it. That's an aside. I don't want to get into it. But this concept is very interesting, which basically means if somebody dies and leaves orphans, now we already had this issue in a different way, which is that the orphans don't really know what happened. They weren't around. They weren't involved in their father's business. So for example, we learned that if somebody comes to claim a loan from orphans, they have to swear, because maybe the father already paid the money back and, for whatever reason, the guy still has the document. We don't know why, but he has to swear that he really didn't get the money back because maybe someone's trying to dupe him. In this case, what we're going to have is the concept, or not even in this case, in any case with Yomi, if there's a case and there's claims to be made, meaning the father could have claimed, we don't even know if it's true or not. Okay. A father could claim, right? I this, I that, I the other thing. He could claim all sorts of things. If it's a claim that would have been accepted in court, now we assume that the father's only going to claim the claim if it really happened. But when we're talking about orphans, and since nobody knows what happened, any possible claim the father could have made himself, again, we're assuming the father would only make it if it was actually true. But if the father's not here, we can basically come and make that claim for them. And in fact, we're going to see cases where the court themselves, the judges, do it. And they say, well, listen, you have this kind of claim, I'm going to claim it for you, even though we don't even know if that was really true or not. Okay, so that's a way of protecting orphans, like another way of protecting orphans. So we had a case. So again, he was signed on a document where Rachel sold the field to Tamar. Reuven was signed as saying Tamar's field that she just bought borders on Rachel's field on the left. Heir. He started to make a claim that Rachel's field is actually his. The one she claimed borders on the left is actually his field. Vishachiv, but he died. Before he died, he found someone, not betropos, a steward, to basically take on the claim and argue the case for his orphans. So he comes before Abaye's Beit Din and he says, Abaye says to him, I can't help you. This is a classic case of Rachel, right? Reuven was signed on a document that basically admitted that Rachel owned the field on the left, and you have nothing, I have nothing to tell you. Amal, so came that betropos, the steward, and he said, if he was alive, he would claim the following. He would say, you claim the field to your left is yours? Well, guess what? What's a field? What's the minimum size of a field? A telem, a row of, right, a row, the furrow there, right? That's how they plant in the field. One row is yours, okay? So now, he says, you said the field to your left. What's the field to your left? We're going to define field as the smallest field possible. So all Reuven admitted to, he says, was that there was one furrow that's hers. That's it. Okay. Amarle Shapir Kamarta says that, you know what? That's a good claim. And in fact, he's going to keep quoting Rabbi Yochanan to Amar Rabbi Yochanan in Ta'an ba'amal tel machadasiti lecha ne'eman. If he says one furrow was yours, he's believed. Okay. Now, Rashi points out here, and this is important because it's a little hard to understand the continuation without this. Rashi claims here that that he brought witnesses that said that he had to have brought witnesses. There had to be witnesses that said that at some point the field was Reuven's. Okay, because otherwise this next claim is not going to really work. And in fact, there's a big debate about how this next claim works. But we're going to assume right now, we'll go with Rashi, that there were witnesses that said that at some point the field was Reuven's. But then we have after that, Reuven is signed in a document saying that Rachel claims the field on the left is hers. So basically we're going to say, okay, the field is hers, but we're going to define it minimally based on the fact that Reuven has witnesses and a document or something to prove that at some point he owned the field. Okay. Now, comes Abaye and says, okay, but Ziel havle miyat halamachat. You have to give her that furrow. That's hers. Hava ale richva dedikla. Well, what was the problem? There was a whole row here, the row that was on the left there, or whatever side it was. I just made up left, but whatever side it was, had this row of very of palm trees that were all squished together, a lot of them, that kind of made a fence. And it was very expensive. So he didn't want to give up that row. Okay, so even though he said, oh, it's only one row, but he doesn't want to give up that row. So now what happened? Amarle, he comes forward with another claim. And he says, if he were alive, he would say, he could say, it's true that okay, now again, let's go back in the timeline. First, we have a document saying that Reuven said it was his, right? In other words, somehow there was a document attesting to the fact that Reuven owned it. Then Reuven is signed on saying that the left row is hers. Border, right by the border of the second field, of the field to the right, that left border is hers. That, he says, that only meant a row. Again, the steward's claiming. But that row that I admitted, okay, so let's say the witnesses came forward in September and said it's there. October, he signed on saying it's hers. And then in November, he comes forward and says, it's mine. So he could claim, now without any proof, and this is why Rashi says it must be that there were witnesses to say it was his to begin with, he can claim, I bought it from her. Why? So Rashi says, this comes into Hapesha Asaru Hapeshi Tir. Again, we end the Masechet with things we talked about in the beginning, which means without his signature on that document, what testimony do we have? The two witnesses who say that the field was Reuven's to begin with. Only because Reuven signed in this document. Now, it's true there's another witness with him, but basically, if he weren't there and it was just one witness signed, that document would be useless. So because of his admission, right, Hapesha Asal, he basically signed on this document and gave her a claim that that hedge of palm trees was hers. So when he comes and says, I bought it from her, he's believed because he's the one who basically said it was hers, and therefore he's the one who can basically be matir it and say it's mine. In other words, now it's mine. By not denying what he signed, he's saying things changed since then. I purchased it from her, even though I don't have proof for it. That's a classic Hapesha Asar Hapeshi Tir. Now, some people take issue with Rashi, and this is a big issue about Hapesha Asar Hapeshi Tir. Usually, what's our classic case? The woman comes forward, she goes into a new city, nobody knows her, and she wants to get married. And she says, I was married previously, but I'm divorced now, without bringing proof that she's divorced. So we believe her, because if she hadn't told us anything, right, we'd have no way to know that she was even married. So she's the one who said she was married, and she's the one who says she's divorced. Some people say to Rashi, Pesha Sarah, Peshi Tir is always when you say it at the same time. And the statement that forbids also includes that you're permitting. So this is not the case. He has one document where he signed, and then later he comes and says, I purchased it from her. So some people claim this isn't a Pesha Asar, and they try to come up with different, like amigo, that he could have claimed it was a forged document. It's different. It's not an easy thing to figure out exactly how this whole thing works, and that's why there's arguments among the commentaries about how exactly it works. But basically, the idea is that this apitropos succeeded in basically first proving she only gets one row, and then proving even that row he could keep for the orphans. And Amarle, in fact, Abai agrees with him. Shapir Kamart, what you said is valid. To Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, "Im ta'am ba'amar chazar to the katib mimenu ne'eman." You're actually believed for a claim like that, as I just explained, either because of Pesha Asar or Peshi Itil, or because maybe amigo, that he could have gotten a better lie and just said the whole shtar is invalid, it was a forgery, blah blah blah. Okay, so Amar Abaye, the last line of the sugya is Abaye comes forward and says, this apitropos is a really good apitropos. If you ever have any issues, right, he does like a little bit of marketing for him and says, hire this guy because he's really good. Because I never would have thought of these arguments myself. And that would, by the way, support that theoretically Abaye could have made these arguments, but he just didn't think of them, right? There were more out there claims, but they were valid claims in any case. Okay, next, Mishna. Misha halach lemedina hayan. Okay, this we actually learned in Yevamot, so it's going to be a good review. First part, and then the second part will be something new. I go abroad. I lived in a field, and imagine a square within a square. Okay, I was in the square field in the center, and around me, surrounded by all sides, was another field. And I had one path by which I would go out of my field. Otherwise, I have no way to leave my field. But then I went abroad. V'avda derech sadeh, you're right, everything got overgrown, or I don't know what, and I couldn't find my path anymore. I didn't remember where it was. So Admon omer yelech lo b'ktzara. Admon says, take the shortest path. Okay, wherever you can find the shortest path to get out of your field, that's what you should take, because the assumption is, right, I definitely had a path somewhere, so give me the shortest field. Chachamim omrim, if you like the thing about the woman waiting until her hair got white, get ready for this one. Yikneh lo derech b'mea maneh. You have to buy your path back. Okay, you basically have nothing right now. Buy your path back for 100 maneh, which is a lot of money. Oh, yifrach ba'avil. Okay, if you want to exaggerate even more, or you can fly out of your house. Okay, try to fly. I don't think humans certainly then can't fly. Maybe nowadays you come up with some contraption, but anyway, right? It's a joke, kind of saying, sorry, but there's nothing you could do except short of flying, because you cannot walk through that person's feet. So now we have to understand. My time the Rabbanit, Shapir Kamar Admon. Admon makes a lot of sense, right? The shortest path, you at least had a path. So find the shortest path. At least you were deserving of that. So to explain Admon, Rabbanan, the rabbis' approach, why they don't give him a path. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, Kigon shekifua arba'a bnei adam me'arba ruchoteh. This is a classic. Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. If you want to get something out of me, you have to prove it. And I can just push you off on someone else. There were 4 fields, apparently, owned by 4 different people. It wasn't one field owned by one person, or it could have been one field, but it was owned by 4 different people. So each person could say, go prove it that your field is in my property. Maybe it's in the guy across the way. Maybe it's in the guy in the north or the south. So basically, you have no claim to any one of them. Well, then, Admon makes no sense. To which Rava explains it a little bit more complicated. I'm a Rava. There have to be a case where there were original owners the first time when I had the path, and now there's new owners. Now, how many owners were there before and how many after? There's going to be a bunch of different cases. If it's 4 now and there were 4 before, or originally there was 1, but now there's 4. Since now there's 4 owners, everyone agrees that each of the 4 owners can basically push him off. And basically, he has no path even according to Admon. The issue is if there's 1 owner right now, but originally there were 4 owners when I had a path. Admon says to the guy, listen, it doesn't matter. There were originally 4 owners. Now you own all of them, and I have 1 path somewhere. So give me a path. The rabbis say, no, that one guy can say to the person living in the middle the following. Shatak. If you're silent, be silent. Meaning, pay me some money to get a path for your field. Otherwise, I'll make your life miserable. Ilo, what will I do? If you don't be silent and just pay me some money, I'm going to give back. I'm going to return the land to all the original owners. And you'll have no way to get out of here, and you'll have to pay top dollar to one of them. So you may as well pay me something. I'll give you a good deal on it. Pay me something. Otherwise, I'll make your life miserable and you'll really be stuck. So that's the machlokah between them. Now we get to a case. We're going to have 2 situations with an orphan daughter. Remember, the boys inherit the property, but in this case, the father promised a palm tree to his daughter. The Yatomim divided up, the heirs divided up the property, and lo yavule dikla. They didn't give her a palm tree. Sava Rav Yosef lemeimar hainu matznitim. Rav Yosef says that's exactly the case of our Mishna, because now there's a lot of owners, and she claims, I definitely get a decal tree from one of you, right? And now the question is, do they have to give it to her or not? Amar le Abaye midame. Abaye says, no, that's not the same case. Hatam kol chavacha matzematchim. There, each one could really say, you don't get anything. But hacha, in this case, dikla gabayu. This decal, what happened? The father died. As soon as the father died, she was deserving of that palm tree. They didn't give it to her. They divided up the property, and now she's got an issue, and each one tries to push her off. But it's really hers. So my takantai, what do they do to fix this? Leitvula dikla, give her a palm tree, and then redivide the property all from the beginning. In other words, this is different because there was a moment in between the time the father died until they divided it up among the 4 where she was deserving of that tree. So you can't say to her, go try to get it from the brothers. Basically, the brothers divided up divided up property that wasn't theirs in the first place. So it was totally invalid. They have to give back all the property. She gets her palm tree, and now they redivide it. But so that sides with her. However, we're going to end with the story not as much siding with her. He said, you get a palm tree. He died and left a whole bunch of palm trees and 2 half palm trees. So classic question. Ravashi was sitting and wondering, do we call 2 halves a whole, right? 2 half and half equals a whole. Can we say we could give her 2 trees? Now, what's the problem? The problem is it's much harder to do upkeep on 2 trees and take care of 2 separate half trees, right? If they're all, first of all, they might be far from each other. We don't know. So are they allowed to give that to her or not? Yes, 2 half trees are a whole, and they can claim, we're going to keep the whole ones and we're going to give you 2 halves, and there's nothing she can do about it. So with that, we finished today's stuff. What exactly is a half tree? That's a good question, right? I don't know exactly what that means, a half tree. It's a very good question, but maybe something to look up for tomorrow. Anyway, she ends up, right? So on the one hand, we helped her out in the first situation. The second situation, we didn't help her out as much. With that, we'll finish. Tomorrow, we'll get to a new case of Admon and the rabbis.